The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, the International Trade Administration Commission saying it now wants to implement measures that will make it illegal to buy and sell scrap steel in cash. That's part of measures to stay off the Financial Action Task Force grey list. ITAC also wants to change the price preference system for scrap metal. At the moment, scrap metal cannot be exported unless it's been offered to domestic customers at a discount to international prices. ITAC wants to cut that discount for scrap steel from 30% to 25%. The Chief Commissioner at ITAC is Ayabonga Cawe. Mr. Commissioner, good evening. This is a technical area, but there's an obvious first question. How would you enforce a ban on selling scrap steel for cash?
Well, firstly, good evening to you, Stephen, and I think Ayabonga is just fine. I think when everyone calls me Commissioner, it makes me feel a lot older than I certainly am. And thanks once again for giving us a chance to speak to yourselves this evening. Really, I think the point we're making is that the scrap that otherwise would have been destined for export and would require, under our export control regulations, a permit from the Commission, if it is indeed offered in a duly completed offer to the domestic buyers, then that transaction must not happen in cash. We can't enforce what other transactions people might undertake, but I think we must clarify that the amended export control guidelines we had issued relate to scrap that would otherwise be destined for export, which cannot be cleared at our ports of exit without a permit from ITAC.
Okay, so this is, I have to put this in here, this is for scrap that's being exported legally.
This is for scrap that is intended for legal export rather than illicit export.
Okay. Obviously, then you would be able to get the transactions. You would require proof of the transactions and you'd be able to take it from there. But what does that buy you? Why is it so important?
Well, I think there are two related things. One is the one you just mentioned in your introduction, Stephen, which is that in line with some of the broad questions around the FATF and the grey list, there is this need for a lot more of these transactions on controlled metals to be undertaken through the national payment system. But there's even one that predates that FATF process, which is the export control regulations that were issued by the Minister in November 2022 and the subsequent regulations that were issued by the Civilian Secretariat for the Police Service in July of 2024, all of which, in addition to having registration for those who dabble as merchants in scrap under the Second-Hand Goods Act, so they have to register in line with what the Civilian Secretariat of the Police requires. But there's an additional requirement now, which is the creation of a registration regime and a requirement for registered buyers who purchase copper scrap, ferrous scrap, and so on, to be registered in a manner that the police would prescribe. And as part of these two mechanisms, there was already signaled in 2022 that the government is moving towards a process where some of these transactions in the trade in scrap will and have to be soon undertaken through an electronic system. So really, this is kind of the first step in that process to say the guidelines prior to this amendment would have allowed for cash on delivery. We're saying under the auspices of the PPS, which deals with scrap that otherwise would be destined for export, that cash on delivery is no longer acceptable. And we would prefer that participants in that marketplace undertake their transactions using electronic channels and channels that can be picked up in the national payment system.
Okay. All right. I mean, that does make sense, I suppose. You also want to cut the discount. This is the price preference system for scrap steel. You want to cut the discount from 30% to 25%. What do you believe the consequence of that will be?
Well, I think maybe let me give a bit of context because this is not a novel development. Let me take your mind back to 2013, Stephen, where the then Minister for Economic Development and later the DTIC Minister introduced, following a lot of pressure and I think if you read the Competition Tribunal finding on the scrap cartel, a lot of chaos in the scrap market, a mechanism that would ensure when global prices for all manner of scrap are favorable, that would at least balance the incentive to export with making available to domestic millers and foundries some of the scrap that is required, especially high-quality scrap. I mean, if you think of stainless steel producers who require heavy sections from rail and automotive-grade scrap as input material in their fabrication exercise, in instances where the prices of that type of scrap is very high globally, on the back of demand from India and Turkey primarily, then there's a difficulty of finding the scrap. And so the discount was really intended, one, to say, look, under the PPS, if you are wanting to export first for a defined period, make an offer to the domestic industry to say, I've got this scrap, I want to export it. But second to that, the mechanism sought to de-link the domestic price at which that scrap would be offered from the prevailing global price for scrap in order to ensure that the domestic beneficiators of that scrap would have it on relatively more favorable terms than otherwise would have been the case if you had export parity pricing. And so in a sense, what has happened here, that discount started in 2013 at 20%. And what you had at that time was the logistics costs for the transportation of the scrap falling on the buyer. And so the decision was then taken in January 2015 to say the 20% actually in effective terms is not 20% if the logistics costs fall on the buyer. That decision was then made to shift the discount to 30% in order to factor in that the buyer was the one who had to shoulder the logistics costs. A later decision was made in 2021 in the export control regulations to amend that, to shift the locus of the transportation costs onto the seller. And corresponding adjustment was not made, one, to that effective discount. And second to that, our own assessment of what the effective depth of that discount has been, if one factors in transportation and logistics costs, is what really has necessitated this adjustment. It certainly hasn't made a lot of people happy, but I guess in policy terms, when nobody is happy, as I've said, that's often the best outcome.
Well, maybe. But I mean, the other thing is we've had the system, as you say, from 2013. Despite that, we've consistently lost jobs in the steel sector. I mean, is the intervention as a whole working?
Well, I think let's analyze, because the steel sector is not a homogeneous space, nor is the technology platform in steel homogeneous. We have lost jobs in the steel sector. The attribution for some of those job losses is an outcome of chronic rather than episodic overcapacity in the steel product market globally. It's not unique to South Africa. Go to Dunkirk and even parts of France, where the same primary integrated producer in South Africa is also culling jobs, and in many other parts of the world. So it's a global issue. It's not unique to South Africa. But in addition to that, some of the capability we have lost, and I think this is where we must also be sensitive to the point that those who use blast furnaces have been making. They've been saying, look, this mechanism gives a fillip to those who use scrap as input material into fabricating steel. And they are arguing that that is at the expense of the ore producers. We are aware of that, and I think in the economic analysis we have undertaken, it is about finding that balance, because we also have a policy objective here, Stephen, which is to green how it is that we produce steel. So we've got to balance the fact that we've got iron ore reserves that we must beneficiate in blast furnaces, much like those that sit at AMSA. But we have to kind of balance that with ensuring that scrap as a strategic material contributes to the greening of our own steel sector and the building of capabilities in electric arc furnaces, which have a much lower emission profile than iron ore-fed steel mills. And it's a balance that must be struck. But I think the story around the job losses has many contributing factors. And I think to scapegoat the PPS is to really build a straw man in order to bash a policy program. And it's understandable, of course. These are the interests at times that are far from altruistic of market actors.
Ayaboga Trawe, thanks very much indeed. Chief Commissioner of the International Trade Administration Commission. If you're in the steel industry, 011 883 0702 021 446 0567.
The Money Show on 702.
Monday to Friday, 6 to 8 p.m.
Well, confirmation today, Romeo Khumalo and Gil Oved's LLH Capital seems to have done quite well out of the Optasia listing. They sold a significant part of their stake when Optasia listed on the JSE yesterday. Now they're looking at an AI fund in Africa. Gil Oved is the co-founder of LLH Capital on the line now. Gil, good evening. I imagine you're quite chuffed. Is that the right word with how your investment in Optasia went?
Hi, Stephen. Good to be with you guys. Chuffed is a good word. Yeah, it's been a long journey, an exciting journey. We were first exposed to the business nearly 10 years ago, and it's been pretty amazing to see how it's transformed and mutated and scaled and grew to this final outcome. So yeah, chuffed it is.
The key to this thing, it's always getting in at the right time. Are there other opportunities in Africa, maybe in Southern Africa, of companies that are a bit like where Optasia was 10 years ago?
Yeah, of course. We had an investment thesis 10 years ago, and the same holds true now as it did then. The reality is that you've got two very big sectors, the financial services sector and the telecom sector. They're big, they're distinct, they've got big balance sheets, they've got big distribution, many, many customers. They know a lot about these customers, but they're highly regulated and they're limited with their ability to be agile. And so they're converging. They're trying to get into each other's space. And for that to materialize into profits, you've got a lot of entrepreneurial businesses, very similar to Optasia, that are finding solutions for customers. And these big behemoths need to outsource to these guys very often because they're not able to do it themselves in-house. Now, either outsource or acqui-hire or acquire. And these businesses start off small, but they grow very quickly. They're able to scale. They're profitable almost immediately sometimes. And that becomes an interesting space for us. So we're seeing a lot of these kind of businesses.
You want to particularly invest in AI. You want to create a fund for that. What kind of opportunities are you looking for apart from, profitable ones?
Well, I mean, AI is a catch-all phrase. The reality is we want to invest in fintech businesses, but there is no business now that isn't doing things in AI. And so whether it's a traditional fund or co-investments along the way, we've got a family office that we've pooled now that we've committed $50 million to this initiative. And we're looking to deploy about $200 million in the next 2 to 3 years together with investors and partners. And we're already seeing a lot of deal flow. We're on the verge of closing another very exciting deal, which we'll be able to share with you in the next couple of months. And it's all in the same space of payments, remittances, loans, microloans, nano loans. It's really to create financial inclusion and to basically uplift the continent and other emerging markets. And to do that by providing capital, but not just capital. It's also providing strategy, mentorship, guidance, a good governance and regulatory framework. And that's the kind of stuff that Romeo brings. And certainly I think I do so too.
Are there particular countries or parts of Africa where you think this is going to happen? I mean, I'd like to think South Africa and Southern Africa, considering our industrial base, might be a good place to start.
Well, yes, it's quite funny. I've recently moved to the States. This is part of our plan to expand beyond the borders of the African continent, so to speak. And there's a lot of opportunity in Latin America, which I've already been exposed to. And what's interesting is there is a lot of interest in Africa and specifically South Africa from big family offices. They've got excess liquidity here in America, and all the deals here are fully priced already. They're looking for opportunities on a risk-adjusted basis, but the truth is that they don't know what they don't know in South Africa. And then very often they're curious but fearful, and there's a misperception on risk. And as I have conversations with these large family offices, and I explain to them that South Africa, if you look at it, it may have some challenges and maybe the growth is a little bit anemic, but the reality is it's a really good news story because if you look at the finances, they're stable, they're world-class systems and infrastructure, and there's a lot going for it, but they just don't know enough about it. And so we fill that delta, that asymmetry of information. And I think that our mission is to just bring more capital into South Africa and the SADC region, which is what we're familiar with, and provide opportunities for these entrepreneurs just to get capital, because that's really the only thing that they're missing. They've got all the innovation and the desire, and certainly with AI now, it's allowing us to leapfrog these challenges.
Gail Oved, thanks so much, co-founder of LLH Capital.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Chris Stewart's portfolio manager at 91. Chris, good evening. Solid production figures from Goldfields and a good gold market.
Yep. Good evening, Stephen. A very solid third quarter trading update, a production report from Goldfields with 621,000 ounces of production, up 6% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. And I think that's probably, and the market movement today reflects it a little bit better than the market was looking for, particularly as a result of the ramp up of their Salares Norte mine in Chile, as well as their operations in Australia, where they will now also be consolidating 100% of the Grio mine there.
The Cell C, obviously the listing on the JSE, we've all known it was coming, but finally sort of confirmation on SENS and how it's going to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's been coming a long time, as you say, but there's been, a lot of debt in the Cell C structure. There's been an inordinately complex shareholding structure as a result of some of legacy debt instruments that were converted. So that is largely being unscrambled by virtue of today's transaction. Nedbank and Lesaka, two of the financial services companies that were involved and had exposure there, will be having debt exposure repaid and some compensation for the equity stake that they have ended up with in Cell C. So they'll be exiting, and Cell C will be listing with a significantly lower debt stack and a significantly less complex shareholder register pre-listing. So there'll be the second IPO on the market in fairly short succession. We spoke earlier about Optasia, so we're going to see Cell C coming to the market. And I think it's good to see the number of listings on the exchange going the other way for a change, because there's been a long time that we've really seen the number of stocks listed on the local exchange going backwards.
US markets sort of turning positive last time I checked this evening after quite a difficult day yesterday. Some employment numbers out. It's called the ADB index, but they're not official, which seemed quite positive.
Yeah, this is a private sector company that produces a labor report as a result of surveys. It's not as widespread as the US government statistics that typically get produced, which known as the non-farm payrolls, which we won't be seeing this week again, because the US shutdown has now become the longest US government shutdown in history, I believe. So stabbing in the dark a little bit from a macro perspective, but to the extent that the ADP employment change is a reasonably good indicator of what's going on in the market. Some encouragement there, a little bit better than expected, 42,000 jobs versus 30,000 expected. US markets responding reasonably well to that, but I think the trend was already set. You've seen global markets for most of the day have been reasonably positive today.
Chris Stewart, thank you. Portfolio manager at 91.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes.
16 minutes to 7 the time. Preparations underway for the 12th CEO Dialogue on Southern Africa. It's arranged by the European House Ambrosetti. The discussion this year expected to focus on building partnerships and dealing with infrastructure gaps. The chair of the European House Ambrosetti is Nhlanhla Nene. You know him, of course, from the various roles he's played in our society, and including the sort of starring role he had in a drama that took place over 10 years ago. Mr. Nene, good evening. I hope you don't mind me reminding you of all of that. You're focusing on partnerships this year in your dialogue. What would you like to see from this year's event? What kind of conversations are you helping to start?
Great, and thanks, Stephen, for hosting me. And indeed, I don't mind being reminded of my past, but who wants to be associated with his ex?
Yes.
Yeah, but briefly, Stephen, today, this year's event, as you know, coincides with South Africa's presidency of the G20. And we will be having this on the margins of the G20. So the partnerships we're talking about as a think tank. European House Ambrosetti is a think tank, actually number 1 in Italy and ranked number 4 in Europe and amongst the top 20 in the world. But we actually bring together captains of industry, which would be CEOs, as we call it in most cases, but not only CEOs, managing directors, just all captains of industry, but you actually connect them with their peers, but also with policymakers. In this instance, we will also have, like we've done in the past, heads of state because of its proximity to, we are actually at the same venue with the G20 on the 20th and the 21st.
Sure. We've seen a a stronger partnership between government and business than ever before, actually, I would say, in South Africa. Your memory will be better than mine. They seem to be working together quite well at the moment. Do you think that's leading to change for many South Africans? I mean, is that making things better?
It definitely is, but because it's actually a realization and an awakening of both sides, both government and the private sector, that this symbiotic relationship works for both parties if it is handled properly. Well, of course, issues of mistrust between the two will always surface from time to time, but I think there is a lot of effort to try and bridge that gap. But the think tanks that we will also run, like ourselves, do provide a platform for these matters to be socialized on. We invite ministers, we invite a number of players in the private sector to address the chief executives that are who are members of Ambroseti, but also those that are not members would actually from time to time join us whenever we have these events in order to benefit from the wisdom around the table.
I mean, it's obvious that what we really need to do is sort out our infrastructure. There have been so many promises over the years.
It's one of the areas, yes.
Yeah.
It's one of our focus areas.
Yes. I mean, I wonder if maybe the promises mean a bit more this time, that actually this time around we might start to see a real change.
Indeed, and I think what has happened also is also giving, the issues and the geopolitical developments have also given rise to a more resolve to implement the CFTA as well, because Africa is not trading enough among itself or within itself. So it's an opportunity now to look for those opportunities, to try and find those synergies, taking into account areas of cooperation, but also competitive areas as well.
You talk about the G20, you're in the same venue at the same time. I have no idea how you were able to achieve that. It can't have been easy.
I think some of us have got some magic in our hands. The managing director of the European House, Ambroseti, is Emilio De Moli, former Prime Minister of Italy. So maybe. maybe. Yeah. So that's where being associated with your ex-life perhaps comes into play.
So what I wanted to ask is, everybody talks about the G20, and I get it. I mean, it is important that we have it here. It's important that it's in Africa. It's important that it's the first time. The conversations that we have are important. It's important that our president and the presidency has been able to set the tone. I mean, the release yesterday of the inequality report, I think, shows the value of all of that. What I do want to get to, though, is the day after the G20, so the Monday afterwards, do you think it's going to lead to any kind of real change? And I realize that's an unfair question in a way, because these are all long-term processes. But is it as important as everybody says it is?
Look, I think at times some of the, statements and resolutions that are arrived at in these events do take shape depending on the commitment of the and the seriousness of the countries that are engaged. And I would imagine that this time around we might see some improvement, because all of these diagnostics of the issues that we need to deal with, issues of energy, issues of infrastructure that we're talking about, they present these countries with an opportunity of actually getting their economies back on track and looking after their citizens in terms of creating employment, because economic development at the end of the day is about the real bread and butter issues.
Nhlanhla Nene, good to hear from you again, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Chairman of the European House, Ambroseti, and of course a former Minister of Finance. 9 minutes now to 7.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB, advancing Red Rocket's ambitions with Discovery Green as the off-taker to power Africa's future through affordable, renewable energy.
7 minutes to 7 the time. An important report today by Carol Payton in News 24 suggesting that DTIC Minister Parks Tau is now actually looking at a heavily revised version of the Transformation Fund. This is the fund that would get 100 billion rand from contributions from established companies. Some of the major changes would seem to include that apart from providing capital, the new fund would also look at access to capability and access to markets, and would include a real-time monitoring system. I mean, you know, the problem with these things is often, we see it with various other funds. Money goes to an organization, it fails, the money is lost. This would be an attempt, I presume, to try and stop that from happening. For the moment, it seems not everyone is convinced. Heighton Kesave is the CEO of what's called Unconventional CA. They are, in fact, an SME empowerment organization. Heighton, good evening. You were a critic of the original plan. Does what we know about this new plan mollify you? Does it address your concerns in any way?
Stephen, good evening, and thank you for having me on the show. To answer your question in simple terms, no. I have no confidence. Even though there's this new and improved elements from a governance perspective, the fundamentals haven't changed, like you rightly said, from the monitoring and evaluation perspective. Historically, funds have been deployed. Where have they gone? What has been done? I still don't see the risks of this becoming a network of PELs, hiring another bunch of PELs being eradicated, for a better word.
Okay, I mean, this is the great risk. This is why so many organizations resisted the first version, including Business Unity South Africa and others. What would you do then if we accept that our economy needs to transform, if we accept that, in particular, the township economy needs capital and needs investment? What would you do?
So, the first thing that to ask yourself is, the government here is really taking the onus and responsibility of what BEE and transformation is about away from the power of corporates. Now, we are so big advocates of corporates being good citizens, and they need to take responsibility as these active citizens by doing good back into society, which was essentially what BEE was about. Now, with what they are proposing, essentially they're saying just drop a pot of money into a basket, you get your BEE points, and Bob's your uncle, and you can move on that end. Now, real transformation in this country is not going to happen when that just takes place. If corporates are held accountable and they can align what they need to do with elements of ESG and SDG and factor in social impact towards uplifting the small business economy, which is essentially what ESG is about, then we can really see transformation and growth happening. I don't think accountability should be shifted from a corporate citizen to government, because we know what our government essentially is capable of right now. The results speak in the market itself and the performance of our country and the confidence level. Luckily, we're off the grey listing just recently as last week, but look how long it's taking us to move forward. Our GDP growth against our emerging market competitors is extremely stagnant. We sit at 1% at max.
Sure.
Our countries like India,
you
China,
don't have to give us the whole list. We know. Okay. We have to do something. Do you believe we need a race-based redress, or would you rather go with I suppose, the DA approach, which is about opportunity rather than about race?
I don't think a race-based approach is a good thing or bad thing. I think what needs to really happen is a collective of the minds where corporates, private sector individuals who are in this space working with entrepreneurs on a day-to-day basis, and government sit together to understand what is the actual reason and the logic behind this transformation fund. How is this monitoring and evaluation system actually going to be implemented? I can tell you now, in any of the state-owned entities today, there is no effective monitoring and evaluation system that diagnoses and assesses.
So I mean, I accept all of that, but why not a race-based redress system? I mean, never mind the implementation. I mean, I accept all of the arguments you make there, but why not, philosophically?
Oh, I think it's just going to cause a hoorah in our country based on the history of what our country has come through. And if you're going to go with the race-based system, it's going to transform a lot of what BEE is done. There's been a lot of good that is done, especially around ownership structures, etc., where empowerment has been done properly. It's not going to be something that can be switched overnight. And I think to transform and change 20 years of work that's been implemented, it's not just pulling out a tree and like, okay, let's start again from scratch. There's a lot of trust, a lot of legacy shareholding where people and communities are benefiting from certain financial gains that now we're asking ourselves, no, this is no longer applicable. And I don't think that that's going to be received very well by the public.
Okay, well, I mean, we will see, because I suspect that certain parties will try and make this a political issue going into various elections. I have another question for you, Heighton, about strategy. It seems to me that one of the reasons this fund has become so contentious, I mean, there are lots of reasons for it, you've outlined some of them, is because of the number 100 billion. And if you took that away and just said it's a new fund and just removed that power of that amount of money, which is never going to happen anyway, we would be arguing about it a lot less than we currently are. If Parks Tower, if the minister just said it's a fund, I think this would all go away.
I don't think so, because if you look at it in the context of what's, in my personal view, in what's taking place, it still requires a contribution from corporates, right? Which then takes away that accountability and the essence of what transformation actually sits at. And if you look at it below the lines, regardless of whether there's a number or not, the essence behind it is saying, yeah, you can have your BE scorecard. Go away. You don't need to now worry about transformation. We're going to handle transformation. And that, I think, for me, is the bigger issue rather than the number. Whether this is a 10 million rand fund or a 100 million rand fund or a billion rand fund, it's the essence behind what is it doing to our corporate citizens and how we need to behave towards eradicating the issues we have socioeconomically in our country, especially with small businesses and the unemployment rate, etc., knowing that small businesses are actually the backbone that are going to create those jobs.
Heighton Kashabe, good to talk again. Thanks very much indeed. CEO of Unconventional CA. They're an SME empowerment organization. Your views on the Transformation Fund. I mean, can it be saved? I just get a sense that a big change like this, in a way, if I were the minister, if it were up to me, if someone said you have to do something, I would take it all away for a while. I wouldn't call it the Transformation Fund. I mean, I don't know what you would call it. I'd call it something else. But I would sort of start again from first principles. And I'm reminded of what Dr. Stuart Theobald at Teledec said quite some time ago on this program, where he said that we suffer from inputitis and we don't look at the outputs. So I think perhaps the real place to start is with the outputs. What are we trying to achieve may really be the best place. Your views, please, on 011 883 0702 021 4460567 and voice notes on 072 702 1702. You're with The Money Show. It's 7 o'clock.
The Money Show.
Business Unusual.
Well, Arthur Goldstuck, the founder of Worldwide Works, has been at the SAP Tech Ed conference in Berlin. A lot going on around enterprise software, a lot going on around, of course, you actually using AI rather than talking about it. Arthur, good evening. This was a big event. It was an event that involved a lot of people. It involved a lot of money. And they actually try to use themselves in a way as a little bit of an experiment.
Yes, Stephen, good evening. It's been fascinating to watch the way that they have presented their solutions, because most of these big tech conferences are essentially selling promises, telling you what your company could do with AI. And the business unusual angle that really stuck out like a not a sore thumb, a very healthy thumb, was that they wanted to show that the theme of the conference, where ideas get real, wasn't just hype. And they used themselves as the case study to show evidence of maturity of artificial intelligence. Because a big issue in the business world at the moment is that boardrooms are now demanding results. They've had enough of pilots and proof of concept, and they want to see outcomes. So there were two big outcomes at this conference. One was SAP showing how it was using its own tools in-house, and they have something like 100,000 people working in this software arena, and 30,000 of these employees are using their own AI assistant. It's called Joule, Joule, for internal purposes, like, for example, HR, and leave applications, for example, checking out the lunch menu or asking Joule what's for lunch today. It's quite a wide range of features. But, for example, expense reports, procurement, financial tasks, all in one place. They have more than 100,000 policies and documents in different languages. So an example that their chief AI officer, Philip Herzig, gave me was that if you work in South Africa, for example, your policy documents are going to be very different from those in Brazil, both in policies and in languages. And you can now get the AI to bring you the exact document, the exact policy that is relevant to you, rather than you having to go and search through libraries. So that is the one really big area, showing AI in practice in a large organization and at scale. I think that's the operative word here, is scale, because normally these AI proofs of concept show how it works really well for a small team of people or a small group of guinea pigs, let's call them. Now, with 30,000 people using these tools every day, it really shows that the AI rubber has hit the road of productivity, so to speak. AI didn't make up that metaphor. It does better metaphors than me. So that's the one area. And
just a second. Sorry, Arthur. The fact that it's so many people, does that make it a much tougher thing to run? So on one level, I mean, it shouldn't. ChatGPT is used by, I think, 500 million people sort of on a weekly basis. But for one organization, you've got everybody kind of running on the same thing.
Yes, exactly. So if you use ChatGPT regularly, for example, you'll find often it pauses. It seems to be thinking, but in fact, it's overloaded. And sometimes it forgets what it's doing because it's overloaded. And that certainly happens inside a company that doesn't have the massive resources that a open AI would have for ChatGPT. So they have to prove, the developers of these products have to prove that these tools can work at a large scale, that it's not going to be slowed down because 30,000 people in a company are using it at the same time. If you get past that kind of scale, then you can achieve almost any tasks that AI performs in a business context. I'm not talking about large language models processing new drugs or inventing new education systems, but simply business processes. If you can get those working at that kind of scale, then it shows that the AI tools have matured and they are ready for market, basically.
There was also a new AI model. It's got a very sexy name, SAP RPT-1, which is kind of a...
When I saw that, my heart sank because I was looking for something like R2D2 rather than a lot of strings of letters and numbers. And the what it stands for is even more complicated. It's short for Relational Pre-trained Transformer. Just to put that in context, ChatGPT and all the other tools that generate text are called GPTs, and that P is the pre-trained and the T is the transformer. Now, this is a relational pre-trained transformer, so it's an RPT rather than a GPT. And the difference is that it's an enterprise relational model. It relates all the content in an organization, all the documents, all the policies, all the business data, and the relationship between them. So it maps how, for example, orders or invoices or payments interact. And then this is the real magic that was spoken about in the last 2 days. It then forecasts business outcomes that result from decisions that you might make or from data you input. So in effect, it's making accurate predictions for business scenarios. So if there are delivery delays or there is a risk level for payments or there's a risk of sales orders not being completed, what will be the business outcome? So it reads how data is behaving across the system and then makes predictions of the actual business outcome. So instead of predicting text like ChatGPT does, because that's really all ChatGPT does, it predicts what word should follow the next one. This predicts what business outcome will follow a set of decisions or new business information that's emerged.
You really want to steer clear of the hallucinogenics if you're going to use something like that. I mean, you don't want that to go wrong.
Exactly. And I think that's the key to this. It's not predicting based on average information. So the problem with ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot is that because they're trying to predict what word is likely to follow, they tend to take all the words they have in their databases and they average it out to see what typically would follow. Whereas with an enterprise relational database or a model of this kind, the information is only what's already in the system rather than trying to predict based on everyone else's information.
Thank you very much indeed, Arthur Goldstuck. Really do appreciate the time. The founder at Worldwide Works, and of course spending some time in Berlin on the Business Unusual on The Money Show tonight. It's 18 minutes after 7.
The Money Show.
Consumer Ninja.
Well, last week you may remember when we spoke to Wendy Knowler about buy now, pay later and all sorts of concerns about it. And in fact, you will remember that there were two experts, one based here, one based in the US, suggesting that a buy now, pay later crisis could be looming. They even said around 40% of people were not keeping up their payments. And this is such a big issue. Warren Ingram, in fact, our personal finance person, he did a whole segment on it the night before last week as well, because he was so worried about it. Well, Wendy Knowler's been looking at this again. And Wendy, good evening. You actually got a call from the Chief Operating Officer at Pay just now.
I did. It was actually from the PR agency for Pay Just Now on behalf of COO Dean Hyde. All very finite. I said, am I in the naughty corner? What's happened? And they were like, no, we just want to have a chat because there was one figure in particular, that 40%, it certainly doesn't apply to us. So they're one of the biggest players. They have 3 million customers, right? Mainly millennials and Gen Zs. Only 2%, Stephen, are not meeting their payment deadline. So it's split into 3. You pay a third. Say it's 1,500 Rand, that's the typical purchase amount. You pay your 500 Rand up front, and then you hand over your debit card. You can do credit card, mostly debit card, and then on a certain date, normally payday, the next month, the next 500 and comes off, and the third month, same thing. So 98% of their customers are not defaulting. So that, it is quite a crucial thing to get across. I was like, no, I put my hand up. If there was something misleading, we need to talk about that again. I thought,
No, sure.
We should correct that.
And one of the things that I was interested in was how much of the money comes from people who pay late. So that's not what's happening?
Clearly not, because if 40% are, and I don't know which market that's happening, but if 40% are, then clearly they're getting a lot of the income from late payments. But 2%, clearly that's not their main form of income, so they're getting 5 to 6% on each purchase from the merchant. And then they have some add-ons. I was happy to hear Dean not refer to them as value-added services, but some policies and the rest, they're sort of adding onto the model. But you don't obviously need to take any of that. You can just use it to get what you want now and then pay it off over the next 2 months without paying any interest. Paying any interest. And, of course, if you pay late, you get to pay a fee.
So this is then the other crucial thing, is at what point do you end up having to pay a sort of late fee? And this is often where things get quite contentious.
Yes, okay. So I asked about that. I asked about the mechanics of it because I've never done one of these myself. I don't know if you have, Stephen, but it's completely foreign to me. So you say you buy today and you're going to pay on the next payday or whatever, and you get an SMS I guess the day before, an email, mostly emails actually, apparently. And then if they get what we used to call a bounce, insufficient funds, then they give you another. They tell you, and they give you another 24 hours to pay, which I thought was quite fair. And then obviously, if you don't pay within that grace period, then you get your late payment fee whacked onto your account that you now need to pay off. And the other issue we spoke about was there's some concern around people taking out multiple buy now, pay later deals and spreading it and not having a real good picture of how these things are draining their take-home pay. With Pay Just Now, you apparently only once you've played nice with your first one, as you're supposed to, late payments, then they will let you get another one and another one. So there is a little bit of oversight there, but, and of course, I mean, for me, that 2% late payment thing is a pretty powerful snapshot of what's actually going on here. We're not having a crisis of late payments.
What's the sort of, then what are people actually using buy now, pay later for? I mean, what's the average cost, for example? I mean, are we talking thousands? Are we talking, tens?
I did ask that question. 1,500 was about average, so 500 now and then 500 next month and the other 500 after that. It can be for anything. I mean, they've Take a Lot just onboarded them now this month or last month, along with Payflex, and so it's anything in those consumables. But he was saying it's not just for around the 1,500. You might have a credit card, but say you need new tires for your car, or you unforeseen bike repair or something like that. You could use it for that. You pay a third now. You hand over your debit card, and then you've got the next 2 months to pay the balance, and it doesn't hit as hard, and it's completely interest free. And I thought, okay, maybe we need to investigate this as an option on top of our normal ones. It's just another option, but there are others.
No, sure. You actually prefer something that's a little kind of 20th century.
Yes, that's what I was alluding to. So when I first started this consumer journalism thing, the Labour was a thing. It wasn't very mainstream. It was sort of a downtown corner furniture shop. And if you didn't stick to the agreement, there was a 10% cancellation penalty. But since we've had the CPA, since 2011, it's the most consumer-friendly way to buy, as far as I'm concerned, if you don't need instant gratification. So if it's for school uniforms, say, or stationery, you lay by it now, and you've got 2 months or 3 months to pay it off. And if you change your mind because you see a special somewhere else, you cancel it. They've got to give you back everything you've paid, minus just 1%, which is nothing. The merchants don't like it because now 2 or 3 months down the line, they're left with old stock and, they've got to give you back almost all your money. But seriously, I still think lay-by has a place, a very important place, and it is very, very consumer-friendly.
So basically you pay in advance?
No, you pay, so you don't get the goods in it on the day, which is what you do with pay now, whatever.
Buy now, pay later. Yeah.
Or credit cards. With this, you set aside the boots, the winter boots. But I mean, like you could do it in February. You're not going to need the boots till winter. And then you say it's a 3 month labour or 4 month labour, and every month you pay the certain amount that you've agreed to. But say you decide by month 3, actually I don't like those boots anymore. You get to cancel. You never got the boots in the first place, and they must give you back everything you've paid. I think at minus 1%. So I still think for things you don't need right now, if you're a good planner, I think lay-by is brilliant as an option.
Wendy Knowler, thank you very much. Indeed, your consumer ninja. It's all about deferred consumption, and how often have we heard stories about the power of deferred consumption? Basically, that is the power to good money management, isn't it? Wendy Knowler, your consumer ninja. Thank you. Time for your shapeshifter this week. And sometimes you'll hear about an institution, well, only when you need them, which is probably the way it should be for Sasria. I suppose you'd call them the insurer of last resort. And the CEO at Sasria, he's been there for about 3 years now, is Mpumi Tikwe, after a long career in insurance. Mpumi, good evening. Thanks so much for coming in and agreeing to be our shapeshifter tonight.
Yeah. No, thanks, Stephen. Good evening to you and your listeners back home.
You first put your knees under the desk. What was it, 3 years ago, 2022?
Actually, 3.5 years.
3.5?
Yes, yeah. It feels like a long time.
Yeah. Before then, most of us knew Sasria from sort of insurance adverts.
Yes.
And then suddenly in 2021, because of the violence in KZN and Gauteng, Sasria really mattered because it is the one institution that will insure against sort of political risk, whatever we want to call it. I realize all of these terms are contested. And suddenly Sasria was in the front line.
Yes.
And then a year later you took over. What an interesting time to take over.
Yeah, look, before that, I mean, a career in Sasria, people would have regarded it as boring. Basically, they were seen as a company that takes the premiums and never have to pay any claims. Yes, we've had those sort of things. And I think, yes, a year later, that's when I took over. And then you start realizing that there are certain things that you have to do. In fact, what I always say, Stephen, I had to unthink everything that I knew about insurance when I joined Sasria. Because if you think about July 2021, it happened over 10 days.
Yeah.
but it destroyed everything that was built over 42 years. So, that old saying, it's easier to destroy, but more difficult to build. And one now has to take a longer term view. As you've seen, I've spent most of my career in the short term business. So more or less in that industry, you react as quickly as things happen. And here you have to think 10 years, 15 years down the line as to what things are going to be like, and then thereafter build accordingly. Of course, you can miss it completely as to what the world would look like 10 years, and hopefully you'll be close enough.
I mean, this is the thing, is that, and I mean, there were endless conversations for a while. Could it happen again? Which is a conversation with real political overtones. I mean, there's a lot hanging. It's the kind of future of South Africa question, I suppose, in a way, for lots of reasons. Has that changed the way you manage Sasria? I mean, what you would normally do in a case like that is you would have no choice but to hike premiums, because that would be the risk.
Which is what I've done, actually. I've been in the job 3.5 years now. 1 October, we did put in a rate increase because the outlook for us looks much more worse than it has ever been before. Looking at the challenges that South Africa is facing, but also South Africa is not unique. These things are happening all over the world, and we are seeing a rise of what we call SRCCs, this type of risk that Sasria insures. So think about it, Stephen, in Tanzania right now, there is an evolving situation where, the government, the elections are contested, the young people are protesting. Think Madagascar, where you've had a change of government. Think of Nepal, Bangladesh. So we're seeing these things evolving, and the front compete with South Africa in terms of the number of protests that do damage to property as well. So in one way, we're not unique, but in others, there are things that are peculiar to us. Some we are responsible for making them. For instance, the challenges we had faced at Eskom, the current water shedding that we are going through, those I believe we've made them ourselves. We could have handled those situations much better. And we've got the young people who are unemployed. So that is normally a recipe for a problem in the long term if you do nothing about it.
I'm struck by the power of those words. The outlook has never been as bad as it is now. Sasria is an old institution. That's a big thing to say. I mean, I don't disagree with anything you said. I think you're probably right, but it's a big thing to say.
Look. If you go back, we've looked back.
Yeah.
As late as last week Thursday, I was at the University of Fort Hare. There, we're looking at a claim of a significant amount. I can go public because it's in the public domain already. We're looking at a cost of one claim, one university, 400 million rands. Now put it in the context of a company that's doing about 5.8 billion rands of turnover, of which about 12% you spend on buying reinsurance. So you've got this cost base, and then you've got this significant claim. It will take about 4 or 5 of those for you to be in a stressful situation. And you look at some of the as Fort Hare was going on, there were some issues at the University of Free State. Fortunately, the leadership there handled them quite quickly. So it's all happening all at the same time. It's a fast-moving train. We've got the challenges of Zamazamas, we've got explosives and guns, and these are young people, of which 81% of them are not South Africans or are undocumented people. So you look at that risk profile, and of course, the metro cities, they've got a dual problem. In fact, a lot of problems, but I will highlight 2 for the benefit of these conversations. One, the population in those places is growing rapidly. So the infrastructure is just not coping. And then secondly, you put on top of that poor maintenance of the infrastructure. Then you've got a recipe for disaster. Things that were not there in the last 15, 20 years. So that's why we're saying, going forward, we really have to change the way we manage some of these issues in South Africa.
is this another argument then, and I mean from what you say, a strong argument, to sort of further recapitalize Sasria? In other words, to find a way to, either through premiums or to say over a 10-year period, government's going to do this, premiums are going to do that, to make sure that it's going to be where we might need it to be.
Look, it's never one thing.
Yeah,
so we're doing
also never enough.
Exactly. So we're doing a couple of things. One, I've already mentioned, we're doing the premium increase. The second one is the reinsurers are starting to have more confidence in South Africa. And it's more about that we tell them what is going to happen every year. We have to renew our insurance, and we give them our outlook. And then on the basis of that, they price for it. We have been fairly accurate, and we've kept our word. We said, look, you're going to see these challenges in South Africa. You're going to see these things popping up. This is how we're going to handle them as a country. And fortunately, things turn out that way. For example, the elections. We said, look, they're going to be stable. People are going to accept the outcome of the elections. Yes, it's more likely we'll have a coalition government or whatever you call it, government of national unity. And given all of that, this is where South Africa is going to land. And those things have panned out that way. So we buy additional reinsurance. And then what has been fortunate is that, we've got this relationship with Treasury as well, where we give them heads up every quarter as to where we are. They know the number where if there's an event in South Africa, I might ask for their assistance. That number at the moment is sitting at about 21, 22 billion. So if I have an event above that amount, they know that I will be calling. But before that, things will be fine.
Okay. I could go down this road the rest of the interview, but
Yes,
I'm not supposed to, because it's fascinating. It's very, very interesting. I didn't know, never mind. 16 minutes to 8 the time. You were the shapeshifter on The Money Show. Mpumi Tikwe is the CEO at Sasria. Mpumi, I looked you up on LinkedIn, because that's often an interesting place to start. It's what people say about themselves that's kind of revealing rather than what they are. And your entry starts at Santam. Now, you obviously had a life before that. I mean, I presume you weren't born at Santam.
No, definitely. Look, I've had an exciting insurance career life, which started by accident.
Oh, your life or insurance?
Insurance. Okay. I will have to ask my mom that. I hope she's not listening. But Stephen, go back. I matriculated in 1982 in a place, Mzomhle High School in Dansane, which is a township near East London. We're proud of the fact that we're the second biggest township in the country after Soweto. Most people do not know that. I come to Johannesburg 1983, to Wits University in particular. And
How did you get into Wits in 1983? And you know what I'm asking.
Yes, I know exactly. It was a lovely story. I mean, then Anglo-American was on a mission to develop black talent, to develop black middle class, to identify, which people can be shapeshifters in the future, and so on. So I was fortunate. I was one of 12 students who were chosen by Anglo-American to study engineering. The other 12 will do accounting. So the group of 24 of us. And I guess they were the biggest funders of University of Witwatersrand. Yes, we needed to get permission from the minister of whatever those days. Nick Kornoff, he was the guy at that time. But Anglo-American, given its financial muscle, its presence in South Africa, it was able to do these things. Yes, and then I started at Wits. And then come 1985, I failed. And I don't tell my parents. And then my first son was on the way. Don't ask why. And all of that. And I'm turning 21 years of age. And so then I was looking for a job. Because you had to pass to keep on your bursary. And up the road at Wits, Jorrison Street, at the corner, now it's Kosatu House, there was a company called General Accident. So I called them up and I said, you know what? I mean, I've just done engineering. I didn't succeed at Wits. Can you give me a job? And I could see the HR lady at that time, Elizabeth, that was her name. May God bless her soul. She laughed and says, come and see me. And then that's how my insurance career started in claims. Yeah.
You literally went and knocked on the door.
Literally. But then I called, those.
Rotary dial thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I dialed in and she was very warm when I met her. And she says, okay, if you've done engineering at Wits, even though you failed, you must be pretty smart. So let's see what we can do with you. And 40 almost 40 years later now, I'm the CEO of Sazria. Then from there...
It's an amazing story, that.
Yes, no, look, one thing I've learned, as a human being, you need some people who are going to believe in you, who are going to back you up, who are going to see something in you special, and they are willing to take risks with you. It was a huge risk at the time, and actually had fun. I can tell you more stories. My first international trip was because of them. I went to a mentorship program. I got global exposure by year 3. I was at their head office in Scotland. And dealing with the deputy CEO of Worldwide, he was my mentor. So I had these fortunate incidents. But some of them, I would say, they didn't come, is it Gary Play? You said the more you practice, the more like you get.
Luckier I get, yeah.
So I used to, because I was in the claims environment, a general accident, I used to go to work on a Sunday. So after church, I'll go to work on a Sunday. And that's when the CEO will also be in the building for some reason. And because it would be only the two of us, so he'll come up down from the 7th floor to the 2nd floor where I was. And he said, why do you come to work? I said to him, you know what, on a Sunday, that's when you can actually call the clients. Because remember, there were no cell phones those days and so on. They're not at work. In the afternoon, I can tell them what's happening with their claim, and I can ask for additional information. So every Sunday, we made a habit of meeting and then lunch. Then thereafter, yes, he sent me over. So there was an element of working hard and so on. And then my career, went on highlights. I spent a lot of time at Hollard as well.
I wanted to ask you, you ended up at Santam.
Yes.
And you went to Standard Bank
yes.
for about a year.
Yeah.
And then you went to Land Bank Insurance Services. So you went, as I see it, from kind of corporate, the private sector,
yes.
to sort of the government. Okay.
Yes.
Why? This was 2012, I think it was.
Look, I always love the challenge of starting new things. I find them exciting. So what happened at the Land Bank, there was an opportunity to restart their insurance business and make it relevant. So they had a life license, which was not doing much, and they had a short-term license, which was not doing any, in fact, had absolutely nothing. So they said, okay, Pumi, it could be a great idea to sort of find a way to restart this business. And it was quite fun. But let me tell you an interesting story, though. Which is the difference between private sector and public sector. I get interviewed. I tell them what I'm going to do when I get there. In my mind, they're all exciting stuff because I am really good at starting up new businesses or turning around businesses. So that's the area I see is my strength generally. So I had these ideas. This is how I'm going to grow. This is what I'm going to do exactly. And as I said, the company secretary comes in. He's got a letter from the minister. And it was Mr. Pravin Gordhan at the time. And Minister Gordhan has written a letter saying, congratulations, welcome. Here is what you can do. Here is what you can't do.
Wow.
And the part, basically, which made sense, it said, look, where the private sector is efficient, government need not play in that space. It made a lot of sense. So you're going to focus in the areas where the private sector is not playing. Now, Stephen, you are a seasoned journalist and business journalist. If the private sector is not playing there, it means it's more difficult and there's no money. So that's why I always sympathize with anyone in the state-owned environment. And it literally scrapped 70% of the ideas that I had. So, So that was the Land Bank.
Sure.
And I spent a good time there, yes.
We're speaking to Mpumi Tikwe. He's the CEO at Sastria. He's your shapeshifter tonight on The Money Show.
Shapeshifters.
Mpumi Tikwe is the CEO at Sastria, your shapeshifter tonight, 7 minutes to 8. Mpumi, I have a political question for you, and it's about land. Okay. You were involved in the Land Bank in the insurance side at Land Bank Insurance Services 2017, 2018, 2019. I've got the years right. And during that time, for various reasons, we were talking about land all the time.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts or insights into, it is the intractable South African problem?
Look, I'll take the bait and respond, Stephen, because I've had a lot of time to think about the land question, and especially when I was at the Land Bank. The one thing that I've learned about the land is that you can have it. And generally, it requires investment after that.
Yeah.
For me, it's the question of what do you do after? Yes, African people in general, we are communal, and we are not. We never look at land as a commercial asset.
Yeah.
It's like where your roots are, where you are embedded, and so on. And it's got a lot of symbolism and a lot of what I would say wholesome meaning to generally to African.
Spiritual in some cases.
Exactly, that's the word I was looking for to African people in general. But the moment you start moving it to commercial, here are some of the statistics that I had to deal with at the time. There were about 40,000 commercial farmers in South Africa, and they were responsible for more than 80% of the food. Now, generally, if you wanted to have food insecurity, you start affecting those particular people. So one sort of took a view that we had to find a way, whilst we are building black farmers, find a way to keep those that are on the land and producing food there. Because if they do not, you are running food insecurity. Worse as well, you are running a potential of reducing the supply of food, which increases the price, which means that people will not be able to influence that. And then the final thought that I had about it was, there is, it's a sort of a spaghetti.
It's a great description.
Yeah, it's sort of a spaghetti. Is like, all right, yes, we want to do these things. We want to get the land back and do that. And the question is, where do you start and how far? I mean, I remember my dad, were involved in one of these land claims. And at the end, it was like, do you want money? You can no longer get the land. And, most people then opted for the money, and then it went that way. So generally, my view is that we need to find a way to legitimize the ownership of land in the rural communities as well. Because most of the arable land that we have in South Africa is in KwaZulu-Natal.
Yes.
And it is under communal land ownership. And investing in communal land, it's got its own problems.
Yeah.
Think VBS, and the possession. So we need to give them legal title to that land so that people can invest in it and make it productive and make a living. We were involved in a fantastic project with Seleti, at that time, sugar producers in Mpumalanga, where we did an exciting project where people who own the land there were able to generate income after tax of 400,000 rand. Now, some of these people were teachers and nurses. That was the biggest amount of money they've ever seen in 1 year. So what I'm trying to say is that it is a bit of a spaghetti. We have to start somewhere, but generally, I think if we're to be intentional as to what we want to do and put the necessary funding in place and the skills to make sure that those people succeed.
And if you pull it, you never know what's going to come. I mean, That's the other thing.
That's it.
Okay, we've got 2 minutes left, literally. What do you do for fun? You know the Money Show rule here. You're not allowed to say, I go jogging. Okay. So it can be anything else. Please tell me it's rock climbing.
No. I don't think I'm that excited. I think the first, I know you said families out. I've got, two fantastic, 3 kids, 2 boys and a son. My last born is 26. That's all I will say about my kids. But generally, what I've done for fun, actually, I love, I used to try DJing. And
really?
Yeah, so I tried. In fact, it's my
which
home.
genre?
My dad used to make sure I listened to jazz every Sunday. So affinity for jazz, affinity for R&B. Remember, I grew up in the 80s.
Yeah.
So Kwaito is much, much more later on. Unfortunately, now I'm no longer relevant because Amapiano is the in thing. And if I try to dance to an Amapiano song, it's a bit difficult. But I enjoy music. I enjoy dancing. I enjoy watching the Springboks now win. I used to support the All Blacks.
Eastern Cape.
Yes, we used to support the All Blacks there until I think I started supporting the Springboks in Japan. When we won that World Cup, that's when I flipped over from the All Blacks. Yeah, so I enjoy my sport, and traveling. I get energy from engaging with human beings all over the world. That's what I do for fun.
10 seconds. Do you read fiction or non-fiction?
Mostly non-fiction. Mostly
Any
non.
particular biographies?
Look, I've read, remember Alec Hawke published one. Your predecessor here has written has written 2 books as well. My good friend Teto Nyati has written, Betting on a Ducky and so on. So I tend to read that kind of stuff.
And Mpumi, I've really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you so much. And Mpumi Tikwe is the CEO at Sasria, your shapeshifter tonight.